as far as Israel is concerned, we're dealing with discrimination. There is discrimination in Israel. It's a very difficult thing to countenance, from what I can see. I've been there a number of times, and I lived there once for 6 months. Ethiopian Jews, black Jews, were airlifted, Operation Solomon and one other operation a number of years ago, from Ethiopia to Israel to escape all the turmoil there. And Israel was very proud of that. All Israeli citizens must join the military, unless you're ultra-Orthodox. That's the. You're not required to give a pint of blood, but it's encouraged. The Ethiopian soldiers gave blood, and when they were gone, they went to the barracks or whatever, the sergeant or lieutenant or whomever took the blood and dumped it in the sand because they didn't want black Jewish blood mixing with white Jewish blood. So they supposedly rescued the Jews, but they also perpetrated this discrimination. That calls for a different kind of attack. I don't know what attack it is. But for me, yes, we must learn the tactics of old, but we must apply them to the concrete realities of today.
Talk about birthright and sort of give your opinion on that, because I know a lot of people say like, oh, I'm just going on this free trip to Israel, or like I'm not supporting the occupation in this process, and I was wondering if you could talk about your views on birthright.
As far as birthright Israel is concerned, one of my kids and a couple of my nieces went on birthright Israel. They saw an awful lot. They saw a lot of things in Israel, but they didn't see the oppression of the Palestinians in Israel or in the occupied territories. And I was living in Israel at the time that my son was there, and I took him to see the real thing. It's a group called ICANN, Israel Committee Against Home Demolitions, only my friend. And so after my boy went on Operation Birthright in Israel, Jeff Howell, the head of it, took him on a real tour. Birthright Israel, it's important to go, I suppose, on a free trip. But if you want to know the full picture, it's not going to give it to you. The kids come back enthusiastic. They come back uncritical Zionists. It's a problem.
Well, on birthright, I agree. They give you a free trip, do it. It used to be the Brauchman family, right?
Brauchman.
Yeah, maybe you get free booze too. Well, the point is, you can't stop it. You can't tell somebody don't go. But you can tell somebody when you go, check out this group that Ira mentioned. There's also a group called Extend that takes, if you stay a few more days, they will take you to the West Bank. They'll show you the realities called Extend.
I have a different take on birthright. I would tell somebody not to go. I would say being bribed. I would say definitely go to Israel. Positively go to Israel. Look at everything in 48, this is what we call it, and everything you can in West Bank. But from what I understand, people who go to birthright are constantly chafing at the bit. They want to go here, they want to go there. The birthright people won't let them go. I mean, this is not exactly your average tour. Now, there are other groups. There's a group called Birthright Unplugged. And there are groups that are exposing birthright. So that's my take.
Yeah, so I have a question about the sort of domestic position of Jews here, because my grandparents all grew up in New York, poor Jews who couldn't get hired places, couldn't go to school places, and I hear that, so I don't experience that. Like don't have any blatant discrimination against me in terms of where I can go to school and things like that, but I hear that echoed in Jews my age as sort of justification for supporting Israel, in terms of my grandparents faced this, and we have to hold on to this. And I'm just wondering how to think about the fact that in ways Jews do occupy a different sort of like social position in the US now than maybe a couple generations ago, or like, I'm just curious what your thoughts are on that, and like the fact that I can march downtown in the Black Lives Matter marches and I'm not going to get beat up by the police, and if I did, there would be huge public outcry, and I think that like that is something different, but like anti-Semitism is still very real at the same time, and I'm wondering how, it's not a pointing question, but just sort of how to think about that, or how you think about that.
As far as the Jewish community, and he didn't phrase it this way, but it's true. During our parents' and our grandparents' time, to a certain extent growing up, most Jews were poor. Now, I don't know the exact numbers, but most Jews are upper class. So, what do you do with it? What do you do with that? Well, I think the idea that, well, maybe tomorrow, we won't be so privileged here, so we need to go to Israel. That can be discounted very quickly. Number one, not all Jews can fit in Israel. Number two, for most of the current generations, starting with my grandparents, when they thought of the Promised Land, Golden to Medina, they thought of the United States. This was the Promised Land. And we can make it the Promised Land here. Netanyahu said to the Jews of France, come to Israel. Fact is, 40% of the people that immigrated to France, to Israel, in the past 2 years, want to leave. Israel's not a safe place to live. I think if God really wanted to help us, He wouldn't have given us this little patch of desert. Miami means that would have helped. Anyway, that's my answer to the question.
What we're talking about here is when Jews became white, and there are books that have been written on this, there are classes that have been taught. We became white after World War II. Up until then, we weren't white, and there were times in the 19th century where we were not white on the census. We weren't black, but we were not white. Which gives you an idea about the construct, the racial construct. You can say somebody is whatever they are, and just change the terminology. The terminology can change. What you're talking about is, yes, you will never, you can count on it, you will never be shot in the back by a cop. Not just because you're a woman, but because you're white. That is just not going to happen. So, how do you respond to that? I think that's the basic part of your question. How do you respond to that as a white person, and how do you respond to that as a Jew? I think as a Jew, we've talked about, you have to present yourself in solidarity with the communities of color and do whatever it takes. They want you to be in the march, you're in the march. Whatever, they want you to come down in bus loads, or they want you to lie down the street, whatever you can do. If you can't do all of it, you do something. And we do have, a student actually asked me about this. Do I remember whether it was smart or not? I can't remember. And he wanted to know, was he white or was he Jewish? And he was wearing a yarmulke, he was tzitzis, and he I think he was really trying to bait me, but I think he was also Jewish. So we are a white ethnic. That's what we are in this country. We're a white ethnic. We have to, we know we're white, and we have to do what's in our power as white people to advance the cause of the people who are disenfranchised and hurt in this country. But let us also remember that we weren't always white, and we weren't always wealthy. And when I went south in 55 years ago, I would tell people, oh, they're Jewish hair drivers in New York, they're Jewish garment workers, and then people were shocked, absolutely shocked.
During the civil rights movement, how did you, if you did, how did you hold relationships with Jews who maybe weren't with you at the forefront of the fight for racial justice, and maybe who didn't see exactly the necessity of why you were doing what you were doing, or maybe they agree with you theoretically but didn't take the same action? And then on the same front, how do you hold relationships with Jews today who either support Israel or feel like they can't actively criticize Israel due to a variety of factors?
As far as Jews that were against civil rights, how do we deal with it? I found most political problems are not solved by arguments. People do and think what is to their own self-interest. Like this guy I was mentioning in Albany, Georgia, believed that if blacks weren't discriminated against, he would. It was to his self-interest to support segregation. I found that you have to analyze the person that you're dealing with, figure out what is to their real self-interest. And if you think that what they're saying is not to their self-interest, explain how it is. Explain how it's not. And if you think that really they're just on the other side of the fence because they're against you, the idea is to change the circumstances under which they live. Work to change the laws.
My very liberal rabbi who said that you don't even have to believe in God taught me that the most important thing of being Jewish is always asking questions. Perhaps that's why Jews are often so versed in academia. But you mentioned specifically about it sounds like all of you sort of agreed that there's this kind of mass hysteria around pro-Israel tendencies. And I think I definitely agree that it is rather hysterical. But I wonder also if there is a danger in sort of having a very solid, unchanging stance against Israel, and sort of wondering how we can maintain a critical outlook while still fighting for what we know and see as just.
First of all, I think if you ask the rabbi what is the most important thing in Jewish tradition, they would say doing. The Jewish tradition doesn't emphasize belief. Talking about you are judged by what you do is a Hebrew term that I can't remember right now. I don't think that everybody has to have a balanced position. They'll all come out in the end. You take this position, you take that position, things will happen. You got to figure out, again, what is to your own self-interest. The Goldberg that Dorothy was talking about did not come here like most of our grandparents did. Most of our grandparents came here to save their lives. They were being killed in Eastern Europe. Most German Jews came in the 1840s to make their fortune. So they had a whole different view of what was to their self-interest. Our grandparents thought it was our self-interest to get together and change things. Goldberg thought, no, it's my self-interest just as they are and sell markets. So you have to decide what is to your own self-interest and what do you really believe in, and then act on it. Whatever it is. That's the Jewish tradition, acting on it.
I think, in a way, you might have hit on an actual problem. And I'm sure I do it too. I get crazy about Israel. I can't stand what's going on. But I should be also saying to people, okay, read hundreds. I should be saying, this is a complicated country. There are people writing things in the Israeli press that are 5 times as critical as I am being. Okay? People don't know that. That's part of this mental situation, this mental block. And we don't understand the internal conditions about people, critics and dissidents in Israel. We don't know that, and we should know that. So I agree with you in that sense. I think we should be a little more nuanced so that we can really understand what's happening there.
You talk about a stance against Israel. I don't think it's against Israel to say that what they're doing to the Palestinians is an atrocity. If anything, it supports the concept of Justice shall not pursue. There are different views of people who oppose the occupation. Some say that the state of Israel is untenable for it to exist. They say that it needs to be a two-state. They say that it needs to be just a one-state state. There's differences. But to stand up against this terrible, terrible shame that's being perpetrated on the Palestinians by Israel in my name, perhaps your name if you're Jewish. That's not standing against Israel.
Well, great. On that note, we should give them all one more round of applause.